So Mary stayed with Elizabeth and Zechariah for 3 months and then returned to where she lived in Nazareth, either just before or just after Elizabeth gave birth. We'll now read Luke chapter 1, verses 57 to 66. Now the time came for Elizabeth to give birth, and she bore a son. And her neighbours and relatives heard that the Lord had shown great mercy to her, and they rejoiced with her. And on the 8th day they came to circumcise the child, and they would have called him Zechariah after his father. But his mother answered, "No, he shall be called John." And they said to her, "None of your relatives is called by this name." And they made signs to his father, inquiring what he wanted him to be called. And he asked for a writing tablet and wrote, "His name is John." And they all wondered. And immediately his mouth was opened, and his tongue loosed, and he spoke, blessing God. And fear came on all their neighbours. And all these things were talked about through all the hill country of Judea. And all who heard them laid them up in their hearts, saying, "What then will this child be?" For the hand of the Lord was with him. As promised by the angel Gabriel to Zechariah, Elizabeth gave birth to a son. Because Zechariah didn't really believe that they would have a son, he'd been made mute by God for 9 months. He couldn't speak, but God kept his promise to them, and Elizabeth gave birth. The neighbours were delighted for her. They rejoiced with her, knowing that it had been a great sadness to them that she'd not been able to have children. One of God's instructions to their forefather Abraham was that all his descendants' boys should be circumcised. This was to be done on the 8th day after birth. Zechariah and Elizabeth were obedient. This time was also a time of local celebration and was the time when the child was named. Zechariah's neighbours were keen to choose the name. Perhaps this was because Zechariah was unable to speak. He couldn't converse with them. So they probably discussed it among themselves, and I guess that they thought it best if they took over this naming task. Anyway, their idea was to give honour to his father. Give the baby the same name as his father. That would show his parents that they respected Zechariah, that poor old man who'd suffered from some strange experience 9 months ago and could no longer speak. But Elizabeth intervened. "No, he shall be called John." John? Why John? No one in the family was called John. What a strange choice. It was quite usual to name a child after some member of the family. But John? Oh well, what does his father think? He surely would be pleased for the boy to be called after him. So they signalled to him. I'm not sure why they signalled rather than spoke to him. Perhaps he had hearing troubles as well. Zechariah asked for something to write on and wrote, "His name is John." Now that amazed the neighbours. And God immediately opened Zechariah's mouth. Zechariah didn't grumble, he didn't complain about the last 9 months. No, he praised God. God had done what he'd said through his angel Gabriel. He and Elizabeth had had a son as promised. The angel had told him that he should name him John. So that's what Zechariah insisted his name should be. The name John means God is gracious. Grace is favour that we don't deserve. God does so many good things for us that we don't deserve. John means God is gracious. God was being gracious to Zechariah and Elizabeth, but also to everyone, as John was to be the one to prepare the way for Jesus. And fear came on all his neighbours, we read. This was recognition that this was the work of the infinite God, that God was active. Their rather casual approach wasn't appropriate. I think it almost certain that Elizabeth had explained to them what had happened to Zechariah and why he was now mute. But really, they hadn't taken much notice. But now they realize that God is active here, and they fear. So the birth of John became the talk of the area, and the people wondered what sort of person he was going to be. And the Lord God was with John as he grew up. Well, here's something for us to think about. If we take no notice of what God says, then we should fear. As will become clear, God offers forgiveness through Jesus. But if we take no notice of this, then we should fear. We should fear God.